Everyone obsesses over saving money like it's the golden ticket to financial freedom, and yet when you actually start putting money aside consistently, something deeply frustrating happens. You check your savings account after a few months and the balance looks almost pathetic. 6 months pass and you've barely accumulated enough to cover a minor emergency. A year in and you start wondering whether all those personal finance experts were just selling you false hope. Meanwhile, you watch people around you upgrading their phones, redecorating their homes, enjoying their money right now while you're supposedly doing the smart thing by saving for a future that feels like it will never arrive. The gap between what you thought saving would accomplish and what it's actually delivering creates this gnawing frustration that makes you want to abandon the whole thing. Here's what nobody tells you about building financial security through systematic saving. It's structured to feel like it's not working. The same principles that eventually create substantial emergency funds and financial buffers are the exact same principles that make the first several months feel like you're accomplishing nothing. Understanding why this happens, and more importantly knowing exactly when the dynamics shift, is the difference between giving up right before the transformation and actually building the financial cushion you're capable of creating. There's a framework called the 5-3-2 strategy that explains not just why saving feels stagnant, but precisely when it starts compounding psychologically and what you need to do to ensure you're still saving when that shift occurs. Once you grasp this framework, your entire relationship with saving changes because you stop measuring yourself against unrealistic immediate expectations and start seeing the actual foundation you're building. Let me break down exactly how this works. First number in the 5-3-2 strategy is 5, and it represents the minimum number of months you need to save consistently before the psychological benefits start outweighing the sacrifice. This isn't some random timeframe invented for motivational purposes. It's based on behavioral economics research and reflects something fundamental about how humans develop new financial identities. Consider what happens when you commit to saving $500 per month from your paycheck. In your first month, you transfer $500 to savings and immediately feel the absence of that money. That's $500 you can't spend on restaurants, entertainment, clothes, or any of the 100 small purchases that make daily life more enjoyable. The deprivation feels enormous because you've given up immediate gratification and all you got was a number in an account that doesn't change your life in any meaningful way. In month 2, you add another $500 and now have $1,000 saved. Technically, you've made progress, but $1,000 doesn't feel like security. It barely covers rent or a car repair. The sacrifice continues, but the reward still feels distant and abstract. You're operating purely on discipline because the emotional payoff hasn't arrived yet. By month 3, you're at $1,500. By month 4, you've accumulated $2,000. By month 5, you've reached $2,500, $5 months of saying no to things you wanted, 5 months of watching others spend freely, 5 months of trusting a process that hasn't delivered any tangible change in how secure you feel, and you've built a savings buffer that still feels inadequate. This is exactly when most people break. They look at 5 months of sacrifice and see a balance that wouldn't cover a serious emergency. They conclude that saving is something that works for people who earn more money or have fewer expenses. They raid their savings for something they've been wanting, telling themselves they'll start over next month, and then they miss everything that comes next. Because here's what happens in months 6 through 10, the psychological shift begins. Your $2,500 becomes $3,000, then $3,500, then $4,000. Somewhere around $4,000 or $5,000, you cross a threshold where the savings account starts feeling like actual protection rather than just money you can't spend. You stop checking it obsessively and start trusting that it's there, but the real transformation happens after month 5. Between months 6 and 12, your account grows from roughly $2,500 to $6,000. Between months 13 and 18, it expands from $6,000 to $9,000. By month 24, that consistent $500 monthly savings has become $12,000, and suddenly you have a financial buffer that changes how you make decisions. The saving curve isn't linear in its psychological impact, it's exponential, and exponential psychological curves are deceptive because they feel almost meaningless for a long time before suddenly becoming transformative. The 5-month mark is roughly where the curve starts bending, where your savings balance begins creating genuine peace of mind rather than just representing money you're not spending. Behavioral research supports this timeline convincingly. Studies on habit formation show that financial behaviors typically require 4 to 6 months of consistency before they shift from effortful discipline to automatic routine. Short-term saving is sacrifice. 5-month saving is identity transformation. The second number in the 532 strategy is 3, and it addresses the most common reason people fail even when they understand the importance of building savings. The 3 represents 3 separate savings buckets you should maintain simultaneously to ensure you're actually building comprehensive financial security rather than just accumulating money without purpose. Most people who start saving make a critical mistake. They dump everything into a single savings account without distinguishing between different financial needs. Maybe they're saving for emergencies, but also for a vacation, but also for a future down payment, all in the same account. The problem isn't that single account saving can't work. It's that undifferentiated savings creates decision paralysis and makes it far too easy to raid your savings for non-emergencies. The 3-bucket framework suggests separating your savings into 3 distinct categories. Immediate emergency reserves for unexpected expenses that could happen anytime, medium-term goal savings for planned purchases or experiences within the next 1 to 3 years, and long-term security savings for major life transitions or opportunities that might be years away. These 3 buckets serve completely different psychological functions, which means they protect you from completely different financial mistakes. This matters enormously for the sustainability of your saving habit because the biggest threat to your financial security isn't unexpected expenses. It's your own impulse to spend saved money on things that feel important in the moment but aren't truly emergencies. If all your money sits in one undifferentiated savings account, every purchase feels like it's stealing from your emergency fund. But if you have $3,000 in emergency reserves, $1,500 in vacation savings, and $800 in long-term security savings, you can spend the vacation money guilt-free while knowing your actual safety net remains intact. Separation doesn't reduce your total savings. It maximizes the probability that your emergency reserves stay reserved for actual emergencies. The average person experiences roughly 2 to 3 genuine financial emergencies per year, unexpected expenses between $500 and $2,000 that must be paid immediately, car repairs, medical bills, urgent home maintenance. But the average person also encounters 5 to 10 non-emergency desires that feel urgent in the moment. Concert tickets, limited time sales, friends' destination wedding, undifferentiated savings gets raided for both categories. Separated buckets protect emergency reserves while allowing planned spending from designated accounts. The third number in the 532 strategy is 2, and this might be the most powerful number of all because it addresses the acceleration mechanism that transforms saving from linear progress to exponential momentum. The 2 represents 2 specific psychological milestones that fundamentally change your relationship with money and your capacity to save even more. The first psychological milestone is reaching 1 month of living expenses in savings. This typically happens somewhere between months 4 and 8 depending on your expenses and saving rate. When your savings account contains enough money to cover your rent, utilities, food, and basic expenses for an entire month, something shifts in your nervous system. You're no longer living paycheck to paycheck even if you're still receiving paychecks. That 1-month buffer creates breathing room that reduces financial anxiety and paradoxically makes it easier to save more because you're not operating from constant scarcity. The second psychological milestone is reaching 3 months of living expenses. This typically happens between months 12 and 20 depending on your circumstances. 3 months of expenses represents genuine security. It means you could survive a job loss, a medical emergency, or a major life disruption without immediately catastrophizing. This milestone doesn't just reduce anxiety, it fundamentally changes your decision-making capacity. You can negotiate harder for raises because you're not desperate. You can leave toxic work environments because you have runway. You can take calculated career risks because you have a foundation. These 2 milestones create a compounding psychological effect that accelerates your saving capacity. Before the first milestone, saving feels like deprivation. After the first milestone, saving feels like building protection. After the second milestone, saving feels like creating possibilities. Each phase makes the next phase easier because your motivation shifts from avoiding disaster to creating opportunity. Consider 2 savers who both start saving $400 per month. The first saver dumps everything into one account and raids it periodically for non-emergencies, averaging about $200 in monthly withdrawals. The second saver uses the 3-bucket system and protects their emergency reserves while spending from their goal savings. Both technically save $400 per month, but after 2 years, the first saver has approximately $4,800 in actual reserves, while the second saver has $9,600 in total savings, with $6,000 in untouched emergency reserves. Same starting point, dramatically different outcomes. Now let me explain why all three of these numbers work together to create something more powerful than any single tactic alone. The 5-month minimum commitment gives your saving habit enough time to shift from effortful to automatic. The 3-bucket separation protects your emergency reserves from impulse raids while allowing guilt-free planned spending. The 2 psychological milestones provide concrete targets that transform your relationship with money and accelerate your capacity to save more. Remove any single element and the system becomes significantly weaker. Save for 5 months but keep everything in one bucket, and you'll likely raid it for something that feels important but isn't an emergency. Separate into buckets but quit after 3 months and you'll never reach the first psychological milestone. Reach the milestones but never establish the 5-month habit, and you won't have the consistency to maintain momentum. Let me make this concrete with specific numbers that illustrate what happens when you actually implement this framework. Imagine you're earning $50,000 annually and you commit to saving 15% of your income, roughly $625 per month. Following the 3-bucket approach, you allocate $400 to emergency reserves, $150 to medium-term goals, and $75 to long-term security. You commit to maintaining this for at least 5 months before evaluating whether it's working. By month 5, you have $2,000 in emergency reserves, $750 in goal savings, and $375 in long-term savings. The total feels modest, but you've established the habit. By month 8, you hit your first milestone with 1 month of living expenses in emergency reserves. By month 15, you reach 3 months of expenses in your emergency bucket, while also accumulating $2,250 in goal savings and $1,125 in long-term reserves. By month 24, you have $9,600 in emergency reserves, $3,600 in goal savings, and $1,800 in long-term security. Total savings of $15,000 from consistent execution of a simple framework. Notice what happens to your financial capability as you progress. In your early months, an unexpected $800 expense would devastate you. By month 8, that same expense is covered without panic. By month 15, you could handle a $3,000 emergency without derailing your entire financial life. By month 24, you have genuine security and the capacity to pursue opportunities that weren't previously available. This is the psychological compounding that everyone talks about but few people actually experience because they quit before the 5-month habit solidifies, or they fail to protect their buckets, or they never define clear milestones. The 5-3-2 strategy isn't a guarantee of specific outcomes. Income levels vary, expenses differ, and life circumstances create enormous variability. What it provides is a framework for thinking about saving that increases your probability of success by addressing the actual reasons most people fail. Most people fail not because they couldn't save enough, but because they quit before the habit became automatic. Most people fail not because saving doesn't work, but because they raided undifferentiated savings for non-emergencies. Most people fail not because they lacked motivation, but because they never defined the psychological milestones that transform motivation from negative to positive. Saving feels stagnant until it doesn't. The 5-3-2 strategy tells you exactly why it feels stagnant, exactly when it starts transforming, and exactly what you need to do to ensure you're still saving when that transformation arrives.